Hello and welcome to episode 113 of Communicast, the podcast dedicated to enhancing communication skills. I'm your host, Scott D'Amico, president of Communispond. Today I'm joined by Karen Canham, founder of Karen Ann Wellness and a coach who works with founders, high performers, and teams operating in high-pressure environments. Karen's work is all about expanding capacity, helping people understand how nervous system regulation shapes the way we communicate, lead, handle conflict, and show up authentically at work. In this episode, Karen and I explore what it really means to communicate from a regulated state, why so many people cycle between go, go, go and shutdown, and how that pattern contributes to miscommunication and burnout. Karen brings a grounded, human approach to communication that connects performance, leadership, and well-being in a way that feels both actionable and refreshing. Let's dive in. Karen, thank you so much for joining me today.
Thanks for having me, Scott.
Really looking forward to our conversation. Before we jump too far into it, if you could, maybe tell the listeners just a little bit about you, your background, and the great work that you're doing today.
Yeah, so I've definitely had a nonlinear career. I've worked in different industries, different positions, and overall, throughout that process, I had always done wellness on the side. And most of that, well, not most of it, but that ended up more in like a coaching factor. And looking back at my career over the years, what really stood out to me is what connected it all was the people that I was working with really felt comfortable to come to me with issues that they were having and really be truthful and open and honest. And I've seen a lot of miscommunication across the experiences that I've had. So today, what I really focus in on is working with founders. I have clients that are companies and individuals. They tend to be really high performing. And what we focus in on is working through the nervous system and how we understand when we're communicating, when we're not in a regulated place in our nervous system, and how that impacts us and people around us. My work is really about capacity. And what I mean by that is expanding the capacity of what we're able to hold. So it's not about doing more, it's not about performance. It's about really being able to work in these high pressure environments and hold more in our systems.
Outstanding. That's a definitely interesting journey to get to where you are today. And as I think about from a communication still skills standpoint, we talk a lot about when you are communicating that it's not only the words you say, how you say it, how you look when you say it, but we talk a lot about how you're feeling when you communicate, right? What's the mindset that you're in? What's the space that you're in? So I think this is a big part of communication and effective communication that one, I think is very important because of just the levels of stress and pressure that people oftentimes are under when they are communicating and at work because of doing more with less and intense goals and just so much going on. So being able to layer in kind of that nervous system aspect of it to understand where am I at when I'm communicating, I think is very important.
Yeah, I mean, I absolutely agree. I look at the person from a holistic standpoint, and I know you have some other questions further, so I don't want to say too much here, but a lot of this I learned along my journey of leadership styles that I was led with, and what, uh, and plus my own personal journey, right? Everybody has their own personal journey going on while they're working in their career, and how that really goes hand in hand, and how we can show up in our career and in the workforce, which I'm really passionate about as who we really are, and we don't have to wear all these masks that a lot of people come to me with wearing. Yeah.
Yes, what we've found, right, when you're not your authentic self or you're communicating in a way that is not authentic, the results of those communications are going to be much lower than when you're really showing up as your true self, communicating in your own style, communicating really truly what you believe and feel, and being in a good space to do it. It's going to have much more of an impact. You mentioned throughout your career, you saw lots of miscommunications going on, and it's part of what led you to where you are today. So that tells me, right, you've probably encountered some folks that maybe weren't great communicators. But if you think back to some of the people that you've encountered throughout your work today and past careers that were really strong communicators, they exemplified what it means to be a great communicator. What's that look like to you in practice?
Yeah, I think the first person that I came in contact with was a boss that I had for a Fortune 500 company. And I had taken this promotion and moved to a different state all the way across the country, had never been there before. And he really was totally different than anything that I had ever experienced and really a breath of fresh air. A lot of why he was able to be such a great communicator and leader was the programming that that company was putting him through. And one of the things that when you would get to a certain level in this company that they did was they would send you to a leadership type program and it would really break you down and then build you back up in terms of like you have to be, in order to be a leader, you need to do your internal work. You need to be aware of like where you're responding from, what are all these things that have happened in the past that are still getting in your way presently. And he really, I love that because I had so much psychology background on the side of the wellness business that I had been running from my corporate career. And I was like, this is amazing, that they're actually putting people through this program. And this is the way that we're leading. And it was the first time I had a leader that I felt like I could totally be myself. And I didn't have to have any fear of what I said or how I opened up. And so that became really important to me and how I showed up for other people.
Yeah, so if I hear you correctly, there's a couple of components that jumped out to me. One part of it was, I guess you could say, self-awareness, right? This leader was aware of how they communicated, maybe why they communicated, and what was influencing that from their current state as well as throughout their history and their past experiences. So you take somebody that's aware, and then they've also created an environment where you felt comfortable communicating with them. Did I capture that correctly?
Yeah, thanks for recapping that. And with that is, there's this awareness that you have, but what do we do with this awareness? How do we create behavior change in ourselves and other people with that awareness that we have? And the other component of that was that because they had done so much work on themselves, they could see those things in other people. And then we're coming with a compassionate, empathetic viewpoint of, instead of having this like judgmental stance of and dismissiveness, which is a lot of what I had run into prior, it was this acknowledgement and I see you, and this is part of the normal human experience, and how do we work with this to be show up better in our current career or whatever it was. I mean, it wasn't a limit of this leader didn't have a limit of that it was just the job and the career that we were focused on. It was like your personal life and everything mattered. The whole human mattered.
You kind of took the words right out of my mouth. I was going to say, when you get to this level of self-awareness, oftentimes it's going to lead to awareness of others, which leads to empathy. And I think it's hard to be empathetic if you don't have a certain level of self-awareness of, I've gone through all of these things throughout my life have made me who I am today. The way that I respond to things, the way that I react, the way that I process things are all a factor of everything that I've gone through. And when you're aware of that, I think you can, one, as you mentioned, you start to see some of those things in other people. But even if you don't necessarily see some shared experiences, you can still understand that the person, the way that they're reacting or communicating is because of something, right? Something that they've gone through in their life or their career. And it allows you, I think, to open up and dig and pry a little bit more and try to understand and relate to it rather than just bulldozing through it like a lot of leaders tend to do.
Yeah, exactly. And this just reminded me of one of the companies that I had worked with recently. A conversation came up about how there's a lot going on in people's personal lives, which has always been true. And I think it's just more true today with just everything that's going on. And like you were saying, there's so much that's thrown at us. The world is moving really quickly. and they felt like they couldn't bring that into work. And my whole stance is, that's not realistic. I think we've been taught that for a long time, and there's still a lot of that thinking in place of like, I need to leave my personal life at the door. And what my approach is trying to get people to understand how that really creates a ripple effect of not being able to perform at your highest level because we're not showing up who we truly are. Kind of what you were saying in the beginning.
Yeah, when you're not showing up as who you really are, it's exhausting. And when you're exhausted, the level of work productivity, the level of quality is going to decrease. And I truly believe there is a way where you can have people coming into work, bringing everything along with them, so to speak, and still create an environment that has accountability, that has expectations, that has high standards. And to me, it comes down to communication. Are you communicating with the people on your team clearly, regularly, doing status updates as to here's where we're going, here's what we need to do? And have you created that environment where somebody can feel comfortable saying, Scott, I'm working on this. We're falling a little bit behind because I'm going through this right now. Here's maybe what I could use for some assistance or help so that we can't
Mhm.
ultimately meet the guideline. You have to have, I think, those two components of it where you're clearly communicating with people, but you've also created an environment where they feel comfortable coming to you when they have a challenge.
Yeah, exactly. I think part of why that's been shut down for so long in these working place environments is people are uncomfortable when it comes to emotions, and creating that comfortableness is part of the nervous system work. Part of that is like when someone comes to you and they may be in a state that's not a regulated state, then how do we hold space for them and still allow them to show up in this human way without trying to fix them or, take things personally? And then if we can respond in this place of regulation back to them, we can start to regulate their system and bring them back into that regulation. And it's really a teaching moment to be able to help them understand, like, when I communicate from a regulated place, I get a very different response than when I don't. And I think that's a lot of the fear that's been placed of why people are just totally shut down about it, of not being able to be honest about their emotional experiences because it's looked at as kind of taboo. And there really is a way to do it, be completely authentic and show up in a way of like, this is true of what I'm experiencing right now. And I can still show up in this way. And do my job in this way, right? It doesn't have to be either or. I don't have to be so taken over by maybe a divorce that I'm going through in my personal life that I can't show up at work. And when we try to shut that divorce out and just, focus on our work and not allow anyone to support us around us, like you said, that's going to create this ripple effect of not of getting more out of the regulated state and getting into these states that are more of a we're just avoiding it, right? And our system doesn't like that. Our system wants to be able to process through what those real things are that are happening with us.
This idea of communicating in a regulated state transitions nicely into what I wanted to chat a little bit about next. So, with the work that you're doing, working with teams and organizations and individuals and founders, as you're working with them, what are some of the skills that you're seeing when it comes to how people communicate, especially in today's workforce, in today's work environment? What are some of those key skills that you're hearing or that you're seeing that you're really trying to work with people on to develop so that they can be either effective employees or effective leaders?
Let me start with the key breakdown that I see. The key breakdown that I see is there's really three states that you can be in, and you're either in a sympathetic state, which is a go, 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 do, do, do. And that's a lot of what we're running in when we're working. And all of these states are normal to be in, by the way, just to preface that. Being in a regulated state is when you're in this ventral state, and it's in a state of where you can communicate from a place of presence. So you're not communicating from a place of where it could be something that happened in the past that is now coming into this present conversation, right? So you're present, you're clear, you're grounded, you're compassionate. And then the other place that you could potentially be is in the shutdown place, which we call dorsal. And what I see is that um, everyone has so much on their shoulders of what they're responsible for, and so they're in this sympathetic state and they're driving forward, and when something happens and there's some type of conflict, what happens is usually a shutdown. So a lot can be happening there from a neuroscience perspective in terms of if we're in this heightened state and now there's conflict, people are either going to react with fighting back or they're going to shut down. And in the working place, a lot of people do shut down because they're aware that fighting back is probably not going to go well. And so then like nothing it compounds, right? Because then that specific moment that happened is there's never any repair from that moment. So what we really talk about is understanding. There's a lot of neuroscience or neuroeducation that I'll use in these courses so they understand what's happening in their nervous system. And that really takes them out of the equation. It's just a biological factor of what's going on. That really helps people to have more compassion. And then the other thing that we do is we talk about how we map the systems. So we map our own systems and we talk about the sensations that I might feel and this more of this like sympathetic state that I'm in. So the more awareness that we can create somatically in the body of like, my chest feels tighter, my heartbeat is faster, and the quicker that we understand the state that we're in, then the quicker we can bring us back to that regulated state. We also work on specific tools that we can use in the moment to kind of bring us back into that more regulated, clear state. And then with that mapping piece, then once we are able to really develop those skills for ourselves, we can develop them in other people. When we're talking to other people, we can recognize, what's going on in their body, what's their tone when they're communicating with me. And with that, we can kind of get an understanding of potential thoughts that are going on with the way things are being said. And we can ask what those thoughts are too, because that's a big component of the mind piece part of it, of the thoughts that are being created in our head of what state we would be in. Then we can even go deeper after we do that. Then we start to recognize what are these protector parts that have been developed throughout my life that are happening in these moments, because most of the time these protector parts are happening when there is like a state of conflict. And so common protector parts might be things like control, perfectionism, overachieving. And when we can develop more awareness about what these protector parts are in ourselves, then we can say, am I responding from that protector part, or am I responding from my adult present self at this moment? And then once we're able to get more skill work around that, then we're able to see those parts in other people. And it's not about shaming those parts or making those parts go away. Parts exist for everyone. And there are good things that those parts do for us as well. And so we want to have compassion for those parts, and those parts in other people as well.
Oh, that's fascinating. And we hear a lot in the news and in the workplace today about employee burnout.
Mhm.
Is is it fair to say that a lot of that burnout can be attributed to people that are in that sympathy state and don't necessarily have the strategies to get back to the regulated state and are just kind of going right from sympathy into to shutdown, or are those kind of two what you would say is completely separate issues?
That's a really great question. And yes, there's way too much time spent in the sympathetic state. So again, it's normal and it's healthy, and we want to be in all of these states. We don't want to get stuck in these states. And when we get stuck in this sympathetic of this go, 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 or we get stuck in these shutdown states, that's when it becomes an issue and we're in a chronic place. Um, so yes, there's a lot of things to be said about that in terms of I would say most of the burnout is coming from being too much in the sympathetic state. And then I hear a lot of people tell me, when I come home from work, I can't do anything. I sit on the couch, I'm totally numb. I might, drink wine. I'm watching Netflix, but I really have no idea what I'm watching. That now we're going into the shutdown place. So there's a lot of going from sympathetic to shutdown, sympathetic to shutdown. Um, and your system is really like, I have no idea what's happening here. I don't feel safe. It's not normal for our bodies to be in those places for that long a period. So in burnout, yes, a lot of people are operating from that sympathetic place for too long a period of time. And there's a lot of things that can go into that, right? I like to say that I think I'm pretty active on LinkedIn and I talk about this a lot. And there's a lot of misconceptions of like blaming the company for that burnout or blaming your employer, or blaming, I'm running a business when it's really about the amount of capacity that you can hold. And so we can speak of this in a way of a lot of people that experience this burnout are high achieving people. And so they don't have very good boundaries. They're yes people. They have really high expectations for themselves. They have, nothing's ever good enough. And so with those types of things, we want to start to work on those. Why did those develop? What are the things that they're doing for you that are healthy for you now? What is not healthy? How can we recognize when it becomes too much? And setting better internal boundaries for ourselves.
It sounds very similar. It makes me think about the work that we do here at Communispond with really helping people on their communication skills is really starting off with a baseline, understanding where you're at today, what you're doing, what you're struggling with. Then it goes into a learn, practice, apply model. Learning new skills, practicing those skills in a safe space, and then really applying them in your real life, real world, real job scenario. I think when it comes to this concept of the regulation, it's you to get that baseline, you need to be understand that awareness, right? The self-awareness of what I'm going through, how I'm feeling. As you said, my heart is racing, I'm sweating, or I'm exhausted, whatever you're identifying what I'm feeling. Then you start to learn what are the strategies that I can take when I'm feeling these types of things to hopefully move into that regulated state. And then ideally, you have opportunities to kind of bring that into the work environment that I've gone through this training. I understand, great, here's how I'm feeling. Here's something that I can do. And then you start to do that at work to ultimately bring you back into that regulated state and avoid shutdown.
Yeah, exactly. And with that piece of like awareness of what's happening into your body, this is what we call the somatic piece of the work that I do. And a lot of people feel uncomfortable. It takes like what you're describing in the work that you do, where you're at, and then we develop new skills and we move you along. Yes, it's definitely the same thing in this program because it takes time to start to even feel comfortable feeling those feelings in your body and feeling those sensations. And part of that work that we're doing is expanding your window of tolerance, is what we call it. So, most people that come to me, they have a very small window of tolerance. And that can mean different things. But in this specific thing, I'm talking about these sensations that we feel. And what we're trying to do is expand that window of tolerance of that comfortability of feeling these sensations, which ultimately expand our capacity. So, getting comfortable with feeling uncomfortable is a good way to say it. And that's really, and then, we can do specific exercises of specific moments that happened of like, this situation was really uncomfortable to me. And then we can guide you through that situation of like going into that situation and feeling those sensations of what they were, and then bringing you back into a place of like safety. So what we're trying to do is expand that safety that nervous system feels. So we have more broadness of this place of safety that we can be in.
Excellent. No, that's makes perfect sense, and I'm sure it has a big impact on people in their not only their work lives, but I'm sure in their personal lives as well.
Hmm.
Karen,
Very much
shifting
so,
gears a
yeah.
little bit, we've been talking a lot about other folks. We'll talk a little bit about you for a minute. As you think about your career and the success that you've had, if I were to ask maybe someone close to you, friend, colleague, family member, what's the key communication skill that has helped Karen get to where she's at today? What might they share with me?
Probably empathy. I've always been really empathetic, and that's partly why I'm in the place that I'm in, because when you are extremely empathetic, you tend to take on other people's, you can feel everything, right? You're feeling what other people are feeling, and that can be a lot on your system. So yeah, very caring and empathetic is what people would say about me.
And how do you see that as translating to success, to career success? Because I think once kind of going back to this idea, the workplace that we have today, empathy has been something that has, I think, been shied away from a
Hmm.
little bit too much, and more prevalent in certain industries. But how do you think this idea of taking an empathetic approach or being empathetic has really helped in your career?
I think it's helped in a sense that I am very different. So I spent most of my career in sales, and I tell people I was very successful in sales, but I was successful because of those skills. I was not successful because I had the language down, or I had certain, this word isn't the right word to use. I had certain tactics that I would use while I was speaking to people. That was hard for me. It didn't feel good on my system to utilize certain skills that are taught in the sales world. And some of them, yes, I mean, they were helpful and I utilized them, but there was a lot of them that it was like, yeah, that's not me, and I'm just going to show up as me. Um, and so a lot of that, I was very different than most people in sales roles. I mean, I think a lot of people, even today, they'll meet me and they're like, wow, I wouldn't have pictured you being in sales, right? And I definitely wouldn't have pictured that you would have been as successful as you were, of always being in the top 10%. And I think that really is people that I would communicate with, it was like fresh air, a breath of fresh air to them. And that's how when I got into leadership and in sales, it was the same way. They would want me to do certain things that was like, oh, well, I remember when I got promoted once, and it was for territory sales. And the guy that I was going to partner with, he was so excited to have me because I did so well in the previous sales role that I was in, and the territory was really struggling in sales. And all he wanted to talk to me was about sales language. And I was like, that's really not why I've been successful. And here's how I've been successful. And it was really hard for him to wrap his head around that because he was so opposite. But because he was so opposite, we worked well together because we brought different skills to the team. So he stayed in that role of being more of like, let's practice how we're going to talk to this client, where I was more of like the humanness of it. And that's really important in the sales role, because when you are in sales, it is very high pressure. And so being able to have someone that you feel like you can come to and that you can trust and that you can really be open about helps them continue to move forward in that high pressure environment.
And I don't know if there's any science to back this up or data, but I would be willing to bet there's a connection between people who are empathetic and people who are curious. And I think curiosity really lends itself well to success in a sales role. Yeah, I've spent my most of my career in sales and sales leadership roles, leading with empathy, leading with curiosity, and selling with curiosity. Because when you have that curious nature about you, you tend to ask questions to try and solve problems for your client rather than asking questions to try to get an order, or asking questions because it's just because what you need to do to hit a number. It's a small nuance, but clients feel that. They feel that this person genuinely cares about my business and helping me. And then they're not just trying to get me to sign something so they can check it off the box and move on to the next sale.
Exactly. Exactly. And there was definitely, I love that you just said that, because there was definitely an internal struggle with me sometimes. And I remember telling my boss at one point that I wish I just didn't care. It would be so much easier if I just didn't care, because it's a lot of, it's a lot to hold on your system. But then when other people are around you, a lot of people in sales kind of are like that. Like that's what they're focused on. They're focused on the sale. They could care less what's going on with like that human. And what I saw was what I thought is that it was so much easier for them, right? And he was like, "You don't want to be that way. You really don't want to be that way." So yeah, I will never be that way. It's just not in my nature, and I think it is challenging to be that person, but it is also really rewarding. Stories that I have of like clients that I've worked with and things that they have said to me, and just the impact that small impact that you could even have on their life moving forward. And then we can talk about how that starts to ripple out, which is ultimately the coolest thing that I see in the work that I do is when, people start to do this work and they start to change. It's very much a ripple effect. And they'll say like, my husband's noticing like a really big difference in me and like, our relationship is better. And that's really what keeps moving me forward in what I do.
Oh, that's so cool to hear. We get that here. It's so fun and rewarding when we'll get an email or get a call from somebody that says, I went through your training 25 years ago and it completely changed my life. It changed my career, it changed my personal life. I now want to put my team through it, or I want to have my kid go through some of the coaching with you also. Absolutely very rewarding when you are able to impact people's lives. And speaking of having an impact, as you think about your communication style, you have this empathetic style. Who's been someone maybe throughout your life or career that has had an impact on the way that you communicate? Maybe something that you've taken from them and made your own.
Yeah, I mean, I talked a lot about a past boss. Now I'm moving more into a communication style that's a little bit different, and I have a mentor that I work with. It's all about creating safety when you're communicating with people, and it's a very different way of showing up for someone and really just holding space for them. The way that it works is that's how she communicates with me. So then it starts to just teach me the skills of like how to communicate with other people.
The big thing that jumped out to me there is that your mentor is modeling those skills. And it reminds me a lot where I have two kids. I have two teenagers, 13 and 16 now. And oftentimes it's not as much about what I say, it's much more about what I do. Right?
Hmm.
The 99% of the words that come out of my mouth probably get lost on them, but the way that I act, the way that I behave, the way that I treat them, the way that I treat my wife, the tone and style in which I communicate with them is really what's going to be lasting. And that's why it's so important for when you have a coach, you have a mentor, you have a trainer, is that you ultimately are working with somebody that truly is walking the walk, right? This person is modeling those behaviors that ultimately they want to instill in you.
Yeah, exactly. And yeah, and I think in this aspect, it really does. It's so different in terms of what we're used to as human beings. It creates safety in the system. And then, from a neuroscience perspective, that's when we can really start to rewire those pathways in our brain.
Karen, as we're wrapping up here, two questions. Take them whatever order you want. One, what piece of closing advice would you have for people that are listening, really just around the importance of the skills and the things we talked about today? And then two, if people want to get in touch with you to learn more about your work, what's the best way for them to do that? And I will make sure to include it in the show notes.
The best way to get in touch with me is either two ways. LinkedIn, I'm pretty active on. You can find me there under Karen Canham. And you can also find me on my website, which is karenannwellness.com, and directly contact me through there. The piece of advice that I like to leave people with is this can feel really overwhelming and to even think about doing this type of work. Some people can correlate it to like doing like therapy type of work, which a lot of people are like, oh, I don't want to do that. I don't want to go there. And the thing that I can say is it doesn't have to be scary. And there's a certain protocol that we follow so that we're not creating more disruption in your system. And we start small. And so most people are at the place that I meet with where we're starting small. And so the thing that I would say, if you're interested in starting to feel what it feels like to get into your body and start regulating your system, is to just, it doesn't have to be an added practice that we do. It can be stacked onto things that we're doing throughout the day. So whether we're in the shower and we're really paying attention, more of like a mindfulness practice of, I'm rubbing the soap on my body. What does it smell like? What does it feel like? How much lather is there? What's the color of this soap? And in really being present in that moment will start, that gives safety to our body. And that's what helps us come back into that regulated place of feeling safe. So little things like that, we can do it when we're walking, when we're just walking through the house or we're taking a walk outside. We can do those same things. I'm feeling my right foot on the ground. Oh, my right foot feels like a little bit tight today. And, now it's my left foot. And then like I can feel that like bilateral movement in my body. That's pretty calming. Just doing things, being more present in those moments of those daily things that you're doing is a great place to start to do this type of work.
That is fantastic advice. And I would imagine there are all kinds of ripple effects and ripple benefits that go out beyond that as you start becoming more present and more mindful. And I've just noticed from little things and from past trainings I've gone through, past experiences around creativity and innovation, just when you really do pay attention to things, the things that you notice, the things that you pick up on, something as simple as, for an innovation standpoint and creativity standpoint, taking a different route home from work or a different route to the grocery store or a different route than you normally walk, and just kind of focus on paying attention. You'd be amazed at the things that you would go by on a regular basis that you've never noticed. They've been there for years, you never noticed. And as you mentioned, it's just getting those reps in. It's practice. It's start small, practice, build upon it. Before you know, you're likely going to see some significant change. Karen, thank you so much for joining me today. Thoroughly enjoyed the conversation. I hope you have a great rest of your day.
You too. Thanks so much.
Special thanks again to my guest, Karen Canham, for joining us and sharing such meaningful insights on nervous system regulation, empathy, and communication in high-pressure environments. As we close, here's a reminder inspired by Karen's message. Communication isn't just about what you say. It's about the state you're in when you say it. The more you can recognize what's happening in your body, return to a regulated place, and create safety in your conversations, the more effective and more human your communication becomes. Be sure to subscribe to Communicast so you don't miss future episodes with leaders and experts redefining what great communication looks like. And if this episode resonated with you, please leave a rating or review. It helps others discover the show and supports our growing community. Thanks for listening and have a great day.